Hello everyone, welcome back, and thanks for joining me, Only Run Very Noob, as I play some more Bravo. Today we have a matchup with Dromai, which I believe is one of the most popular and strongest decks in the current format. Luckily one that we are favored against. We see our hand with 4 blues. We do have an imposing visage though, so going first we can get some free value, and we even have a Warmonger's Diplomacy. So my plan here is to pitch the Thunderquake with the Rouse, go search a Showtime, look for a Crippling Crush, and then play the Warmonger's Diplomacy, hoping that that stops my opponent from doing much more than playing a dragon or like attacking with an E-Strike or something. We do notice Mage Master Boots and Ghostly Touch on our Dromai opponent, so it is probably the big dragon variant. So they might not even have E-Strike, I don't know. Just plays a Lost in Thought against us. Not too sure how effective that is. It's possible he wants to make it so we can't cast the crippling that he knows is in our arsenal. But we get to draw a card, of course. Originally looking at this hand, it would have been nice to just like sort of keep it all, because he did choose peace. Just kind of keep it all and throw the Crippling Crush, and then arsenal probably the Tear Asunder. I just want to talk a little bit about this matchup and how I like to use my arsenal. So, obviously, Tear Asunder is a good threat. Getting it in arsenal is nice. It means we can just keep 2 blues and still threaten, like, pretty good hand. You know, 7 Dominate Hammer with the on-hit effect of Tear Asunder. But especially so, we don't want to be pitching non-attack actions if we can avoid it. Of course, it's pretty hard to avoid it completely. As we saw on turn 0, we pitched a Thunderquake and a Rouse, which is obviously another consideration. We want to put another attack on the bottom of the deck close to it, which our opponent's Lost in Thought will do anyway. But the arsenal slot against Dromai, I really like to put non-attack cards, so whether it's like Pummel or a non-attack action that I like to play. So this eliminates kind of like Imposing Visage, it eliminates Showtime, it eliminates Warmonger's Diplomacy. So those we're really trying to block with for value when they have an attack that doesn't have Phantasm. Whether that's a dragon that's Mirror Guide or just like a normal attack. But the non-attacks I like to put in arsenal include like Pummel, Tear Asunder, Rouse the Ancients, Zealous Belting, and those might be the big 4. Again, because they're just good cards. Like playing them out's good. But even the little extra value because pitching them's not so good. We want our second cycle to be really heavy with poppers. Our opponent's hand under peace was about as good as he could get. He gets to Lost in Thought us, which I guess doesn't really do anything. He gets to play out... I guess it gave him an Ash for Asvalai, I take that back. So he probably had to play that just to get the Ash to play a Dragon. And then he gets to play Passing Mirage, which is probably about as good as he could hope for under the effects of Warmonger's Diplomacy. And we, of course, we pick War, so we can't even make a Surge here. But we do have to attack the Passing Mirage. And interestingly enough, I do pitch the Chokeslam next to the Tear Asunder, keeping 2 poppers in hand and looking to pitch a popper to sandwich the Tear Asunder at the bottom, because I'm not going to be able to get it in arsenal. And because we can't really play the Crippling Crush and let him keep the Passing Mirage, I think it would just be too strong. With this hand, we're kind of looking to pop with 1 popper and then dominate the Crippling Crush in our arsenal. They play a Dromai though, so they could definitely force the issue. It looks like they don't want to risk their Dromai though. They're setting up So here we can take the Arcane, of course, and then just pop and send back a Dominated Crippling. The decision to leave the Dromai is sort of an aggressive decision, but I definitely like to be aggressive against Dromai. There are only a couple must-destroy threats to me, and those are the ones that remove Phantasm. Because for his Dromai to be really good, he has to play some other stuff, like a Mirror Guy to take Phantasm away from Dromai, because we can always just pop Dromai. And with a Crippling Crush coming in, hopefully it makes his hand small. As we see here, he had Reaction Arsenal. So his hand isn't as small as I thought it might get after the Crippling, but we did get some armor, which is always nice. He doesn't play a Mirror Guy, which is good. He had another Dromai, though. Although his board isn't that big, so I understand why he would pitch the Dromai. Because even if he does find us with only like 2 poppers, he doesn't have anything behind 2 Dromai. Again, he saves his Dromai, just sending the Ashwing, and we pop it. I suppose we could have taken 3 damage there and seen if he attacked with Dromai, but he probably wouldn't have. And here I hammer face instead of Dromai. So I like to be super aggressive. As you can see here, I even will let Dromai live. And I think this is probably a play that not a ton of Bravos are making. They're probably trained to clean up the Dromai, which is reasonable. But I think I like to attack life total. I like to get them to block with cards. So we even get a Fate Foreseen here, which probably means he has another one behind Arsenal. We get a Surge for our Starstruck. And we're kind of waiting for a Zealous Belting to kill the Dromai, or maybe a turn where we have to block with 3 cards and we only get to keep 4. And in that case, I think hammering Dromai for 4 is a little more effective than hammering face for 4. But in a lot of spots, I'll still just hammer face for 4 because it gets a card and a point of damage. And damage is good. I don't know if you guys have heard. This is kind of an interesting spot. So we have Starstruck and Arsenal. We could just throw the Starstruck and Arsenal the Rouse. Rouse is definitely one of the cards that's good in Arsenal. It could kind of even allow us to threaten their life and clean up a Dromai with 2 attacks. Although I'd probably like to just go face and get ahead on life. But I think I'm going to try to dominate the Starstruck because there's an off chance that they don't have a reactant arsenal and they actually do just have to take a bunch of damage and not attack us. They used that Fate Foreseen on the hammer last turn, which might indicate they had another one for Arsenal. But sometimes you just like to shoot your shots here. I do have to pitch 2 Dawn Poppers, but I do get to pitch Rouse next to a Disable, which means basically any attack we pitch next turn, we'll turn on that Rouse in second cycle. And I always like to try to pitch popper, non-popper, popper, non-popper, popper, non-popper, so that in the second cycle you always kind of have 2 poppers in hand. And if you can, I like even more poppers than 1 every 2 cards, but it can't always work out that way. He has an Oasis in hand, so he ends up not getting crushed, but we get his whole hand because he even wants to make an Ash with the Kyloria, which makes sense. We finally draw Zealous Belting for Dromai, but the rest of our hand's a little awkward. We can't Zealous Belting and then hammer and then Arsenal the other Zealous Belting. I still think we want to clean up the Dromai with the Zealous Belting though, because that's the only card that's going to let us do it while still threatening their life a little bit. With this hand we could Zealous Belting Dromai and then just Anothos his face, pitching the other 2 reds. But I think I'd rather Command and Conquer them because they have an Arsenal, even though they have Crown up. They might give us crown, but that's fine. If they give us crown, they basically have no armor. And with no armor, a lot of our big crush effects will be a lot easier to sneak through. So we clean up the Dromai and then throw Command and Conquer. So you can see I'm kind of thinking about keeping popper density high and pitching the Command and Conquer and the Zealous Belting for the hammer, but I think the Command and Conquer gets enough value here to throw it. We get to pitch the blue Buckling Blow, which turns on the Rouse we pitched last turn, and we even get to pitch it next to a Zealous Belting. The Command and Conquer does get the crown out of him, which is a little scary because they have a 5-card hand that they didn't want to just like block with any of those cards, but we'll see how it goes. They set up a Necria pitching a Passing Mirage, so that's their second passing we've seen. And then they just play a Rake the Embers. Pitching a Fate for Scene, which leads me to believe they have another Sync or Fate in their hand, unless they're really not afraid of like us dominating an attack with no armor. I guess it could be like an Oasis Respite too, but that seems a little bit less efficient. We pop. We don't really have a hand to do too much with here, so I'm just gonna hammer his face for 6. I'm not going to Arsenal Unmovable because I think Unmovable in Arsenal is not good against big dragons. I've gotten into a lot of trouble with arsenaling that card against Dromai. So I'm just going to keep the Showtime, and I'm actually not going to Arsenal it. I'm just going to keep it in my hand. A little bit of an inefficient turn. His board's not too huge though, so that's why I didn't overblock with the Showtime when I popped the Ashwing. Sometimes if you just need to clear your hand of a non-popper, you can block with a popper and a non-popper against the dragon. That way you can ensure like a higher chance to get a popper the next turn. He just throws Command and Conquer at us, which is quite nice. We only have one popper, so we get to block with our 2 non-poppers and get him out of the deck and get life value by blocking. And we get to hammer his face for 4 and Arsenal a Pummel, which again was one of those cards that I like having in Arsenal, not in hand or deck, as it is not very good defensively. And sometimes against Dromai it can be hard to keep a bunch of cards. Like if they play a Dromai, that usually demands 2 cards, popping the Dromai and then popping the next dragon. And Pummel and Arsenal is pretty good. Like without his crown, we get to pummel the next Command and Conquer we draw, and it should be quite good. We have seen an Oasis Respite out of them, and they can play Sand Cover, so it's not like infallible, but it's still strong play that like demands 3 cards, sometimes even 4 with the Oasis. And as you can see, we've already built ourselves quite a nice life lead. We're up 13 life. His board's not like insane against us, and we still have all our armor. So with Pummel and Arsenal, Pummel in hand, 2 blues and a Spinal, what are we really trying to do here? Pitches his second Lost in Thought. The first one got played, of course. This Billowing Mirage is coming in. We don't have a 3-block non-popper that we'd like to get out of our deck on this Billowing Mirage, but I do think I just block with the red Pummel, just get our 2 points since we're not going to be able to use it. We don't really want to hold it in our hand, and of course we can't Arsenal it. We kind of want to save Crown for something a little bit more important or critical. And then we can pop with the blue Macho Grande, pitching Spinal Crush to make a surge, and then pitching Rouse the Ancients to activate our hammer for 6. Constantly threatening his life total, while also being mindful of pitching poppers and non-poppers, especially a big attack next to the Rouse is nice. Not attacking any of these dragons because I just want to keep building up a better life lead. I just want to keep building up a bigger life lead, forcing them to attack with these dragons as we pop them. He still has 3 more Ash Wings that we have to get through before we start to pop the good dragons. But I think it's fine. If the game keeps going how it has been going, he's going to get his life whittled down, and we're going to be setting up a nice pitch stack with a bunch of poppers. So our arsenal's Pummel. This hand I don't think is going to allow us to use the Pummel. Pummeling a Starstruck is kind of a big thing we could do, but we would have to take 3, 4, so 6, 10, 13 damage, not to mention what he might have behind, and that's just like way too much to pummel a Starstruck. We could take this 3 damage, hope to pop with the Cranial Crush, and then attack with Starstruck, pitching the other 2 blues. But that's 2 non-poppers we're pitching side by side in our deck, and I believe it's 3 because we just pitched the Spinal Crush and Rouse. So our Rouse the Ancients that came back around wouldn't be turned on. We'd have 3 poppers in a row, which is not ideal. So I think I block with one of the non-poppers and just kind of look to move on. Block with the non-popper, pop with the Cranial Crush, and then pitch the Starstruck next to the Showtime. To hammer for 6. Of course he has 2 cards behind, so this could all change. And in fact it does. He plays a Mirror Guy. Which is a threat we have to answer. So we're going to block this Necria that doesn't have Phantasm with the Terra Sunder, just to save our life. We're going to pop with the Starstruck. Kind of sucks we're seeing like a big threat go away, but it is what it is. The cards we draw are meant to be used. So we're going to pop and then pitch the blue to hammer down the Mirror Guy. Patting ourselves on the back for not non-blocking the sweeping blow to try to dominate the Starstruck, because we would have had to just block and pop and hammer the Mirror Guy anyway. You can't let the Mirror Guy or Passing Mirage stay on the board. If they start stacking multiples of those, you just kind of get way too far behind, and they can play stuff like really big dragons that make it really hard for you to do anything at all. Plays a Burn Them All, and then plays a Time Snap Potion. Time Snap Potion's pretty good. Oh, I don't know how I missed him. He played his Mage Master's Boots early. I didn't talk about it. But yeah, Time Snap Potion's pretty big, especially since he doesn't have his Mage Master Boots. But it does give us like full tempo here. A little lucky too. We draw our Command and Conquer, so we get to pummel the Command and make a Surge, Command and Conquer, pummel it, and then Arsenal the Starstruck. And he doesn't have Crown, so definitely caught a little break with a hand that we can definitely utilize aggressively. We're up 10 life, but we still have like 8 points of armor block. Like we could block 6 now and then have 2 left over from the Battle Worn chest and gloves. Or temper gloves, but you know what I mean. Still 1 block. He ends up having the Oasis Respite to stop our pummeled CNC, which is a little annoying. But it kind of still uses a bunch of cards. Like, it doesn't deal 4 damage and make him discard the Burn Them All, but he still has to pitch it to play the Oasis Respite, and he has a small hand here. So the only thing they could really do is play a Sigil of Solace to give everything go again here. So it only attacks with 1 Aether Ashwing. We're expecting it to not have go again, so we could just take the 1 point if we wanted to. But what would that leave us doing on our turn? We could dominate the Starstruck, putting all of our cards back in, because we could pitch 2 and then pitch 6 to play. It only cost 8. It would cost us all 4 cards though, so we'd have no card in Arsenal. That's like a reasonable line. We could pop the Ashwing with the blue Chokeslam, looking to dominate the Spinal Crush, which is also another reasonable line. Or we could pop the Ashwing with the Chokeslam, throw the Starstruck undominated in Arsenal Spinal Crush, I think all three of these lines are reasonable. But which one is best? Which one punishes him the hardest while keeping us the safest? I think I like just blocking with the red chokeslam and dominating the spinal crush. So if this is a sigil and he was looking to give everything go again with the sigil in Arsenal doesn't stop a dominated spinal crush. I think we've already seen 2 Oasises, so it'd just be 1 Oasis behind. I don't think decks have enough room to play 3 Sync, 3 Fate Foreseen, 3 Oasis, and 3 Sand Cover. I think you kind of got to pick between Oasis and Sand Cover. So yeah, whoops. I think I like just blocking with the choke slam. Not pitching for Arcane, of course. It's inefficient. We really don't like to do that unless we can get like 2 points off of Burn Them All plus Asvalai, or if we're like gonna die. So I think the line that gives us the most value while being the most punishing is just popping this, dominating a spinal. If it takes away his go again, it's super good because we have a Starstruck in Arsenal. Dominating the Starstruck might be super good, but it doesn't necessarily leave us with a threat next turn, so we could just take all the tempo but do nothing with it, which is of course not great. So dominate spinal and hope it kind of hits. It would do a lot of damage. We would be up like 14 life, and he wouldn't have a turn. Presumably. Oh, this hand is great. Dominate a Starstruck and Arsenal is Zealous Belting. They end up having the E-Strike for 7, which is just about the best thing they could do off of Spinal. But I gladly take 7 here because they've already shown they didn't have Defense Reaction Arsenal. They did have the Sigil, which they just played. So unless what they have in Arsenal is Defense Reaction, this Starstruck's going to get them, and we're going to have Aggression with the Zealous Belting next turn. Even though they sigiled, we still have a significant life lead. We still have a ton of armor, so our life lead's even bigger than you would first notice just looking at the life totals. So yeah, I like our spot. Our pitch stack is good. We're coming up to pitch stack very soon, like in the next 3 turns. And there's no sections of our pitch stack that are popper light, which sometimes can happen. It kind of sucks, but sometimes it just happens that way. And you kind of have to brace for impact when that happens. Try to be aggressive and limit the size of their hand and their board when you're coming up to that pitch stack. But luckily for us, we have a great pitch stack. We have like Rouse pitch stacked. We have a Starstruck pitch stacked. We have another Rouse pitch stacked. I'm not sure if it's like exactly like back to back to back with hands, but I know they're down there. And what I do know is that there's no hands that are popper light. Like we'll have at least 2 poppers in every hand in second cycle. Just checking the lag. It's been a little laggy. So it does do a ton of damage to him. It ends up doing, what was that, 6? 7? Yeah, 7. Only blocks 3, so you can't attack us with anything. It does set up an Uvia and a Red Dust, the one that takes away Phantasm from Vincenticarii. And we kind of have a weird hand here. We draw 3 reds. We have the Zealous Belting in Arsenal. And our blue doesn't even turn on Zealous Belting. So we're going to have to pitch one of these reds if we want to Zealous Belting them. So what are the lines here? We could keep the Zealous Belting in Arsenal, we could pitch both reds and the blue to throw a Spinal, which is reasonable. I think it's fine. It's 9 value for 4 cards, but we can do better than that with the Zealous Belting. With our life lead here, we definitely want to be pressuring life total. They don't have any targets that we even want to clear. That's one thing. We could maybe leave Zealous Belting if we're like want some security against them playing 2 threats in a turn that we have to kill. But with their life so low, I don't think they can just be taking damage to play big hands here. They're just way too close to critical life points. Like if we deal 10 more damage to them, we'll just at some point we could ignore the threats we normally want to kill and just like try to kill them. So I think I want a Zealous Belting into Hammer or Command and Conquer, which would only require 3 cards, and then I can Arsenal 1. Because I could pitch like Command and Conquer plus Unmovable to play Zealous Belting and have 2 floating, and then pitch a 3rd to Hammer. Or I could pitch Spinal Crush plus Unmovable and Zealous Belting and have 2 floating to Command and Conquer. I think the best line here is Zealous Belting, pitching Spinal and Unmovable, and then pitching Command and Conquer to Hammer for 6. Pitching the Command and Conquer instead of playing it ups our Pauper count in our second cycle. Command and Conquer isn't threatening an Arsenal here. Literally the only thing Command and Conquer has going for it is it would, if they had a defense reaction they wanted to use on it, they wouldn't be able to. I guess another thing I could potentially do is try to kill the Uvia, but at this point, at these life totals, I'm definitely okay with him just like making Ash Wings and letting us be aggressive on his life. If we Zealous Belting into 6, that's 11 value to his face, and he can't just take it. He's got to block it. Of course, leaving Crippling Crush for Arsenal because that is our biggest, baddest threat. Unfortunately, we don't have the blue in our hand. If we had like 2 blues in the Spinal Crush, we could have made a Surge for the Crippling and Arsenal, but it's kind of small. You do just Hammer for 6 instead of Command and Conquer because Hammer is the same damage as Command and Conquer, and he doesn't have an Arsenal, and now we have 1 extra Pauper in our deck. He lost in Thoughtseize here, kind of a bummer. Probably going to take the Choke Slam so that if we want to pop, we're forced to pop with the Crippling Crush. Of course, having a Crippling Crush in deck is a little better than having a Choke Slam, although it would be next to that pitch stack that we just had with like 2 reds, so we probably wouldn't get to cast the Crippling where we might be able to cast a Choke Slam. And we're ahead quite far in life, like 19. So here you see me scrolling and kind of counting how much damage the dragons would do. I'm thinking like, should I just face take damage and then throw the Crippling in Arsenal? If we did that, we would go to 14. It's probably not worth it. The other thing I'm considering is using Crown, perhaps. Because one of the issues with popping with Crippling Crush and having the 2 blues behind here is one of them is Warmonger's Diplomacy, which doesn't even turn on a Nothos, so we would be popping and then hammering for 4. And they don't even have any targets we really want to hammer, so we would be hammering their face for 4, which I think is fine. Like, I don't think at 10 they really want to be taking 4, so we'll probably get a card and a point of damage. And a Surge for our Command and Conquer, or not Command and Conquer, our Crippling Crush in Arsenal, which potentially allows us to play it off 2 blues. Unfortunately, we do have to pitch 2 non-poppers in a row, but this is like the very end of our second cycle. Like, I think we're hitting second cycle next hand. What was that? 34 cards divided by 4. It's like 7 to 8 turns away, I think. if my math serves me right. We even get a defense reaction on our hammer, which is quite nice. It probably means they just have another react if they're going to park an arsenal, but getting those reacts out of the way on the hammer just feels good, because we have a crippling crush in our arsenal that we don't want him to be using reactions on. Even if he has a reaction in arsenal, he has to give us his flame scale furnace plus reaction in arsenal plus a 3-block in hand to stop it. Where if he kept the react in arsenal and just kind of sandbagged the react in hand behind, he could just block 8 cleanly with those 2 cards without giving us a furnace. Again, just a lag check. And this is our pitch stack, because we pitched Thunderquake and Rouse at the beginning of the game to play our Imposing Visage. So here I'm looking to just take the damage, pop with the red Chokeslam, keeping the 3 blues, and dominate the Crippling Crush. With the Surge, we could just throw Crippling Crush and Arsenal the Rouse, but I want to kind of make him have the reaction. And also, we get to just perfectly pitch stack the Rouse as well if the game goes that long. There's a chance that just throwing Crippling for 11 and arsenaling the Rouse is better, though, with him at 10. The thing is, if they don't have the reaction arsenal and they just get Crippling Crushed here, like, they basically just lose the game on the spot. I mean, they're in a bad spot right now, I think. But if this Crippling Crush hits for like 8, they're just like dead, right? We only see a block of 3, so it's probably not a reaction arsenal. And yeah, they have a 1-card hand, 1 card in arsenal, and they're down 22 life. At this point, I don't even think that they can reasonably come back with any combination of cards. Attacks with just Yenderai. I'm checking to see his sigils to see if he could have a sigil. I'm like, yeah, it's possible he has a sigil, so I'm just going to pop so that he can't give everything go again, and then we're going to play this Terra Sunder. And I think he's dead, because, yeah, they're dead. Because they had the same card in Arsenal, and presumably if it was anything that could stop a Terra Sunder, it could have also stopped the Crippling Crush. So that one went very well for us. We didn't have any pitch stacks that were bad. When we got back to second cycle, we just knew we were going to have gas, like gas on gas, with also popper density, just in case the game got kind of out of hand and we were put on the defensive. But we got to stay aggressive that entire game. That's generally what you want to do against Dromai. I know some people like to fatigue Dromai and like run them out of dragons, but it seems kind of dodgy, like giving them really big hands. Like, he has an Ash over here that he never got to utilize because he couldn't ever keep a blue in a Vcindakurai. And when you attack people's life total and they get down low, they just have to make choices with... They just have to make inefficient choices, right? Like, they have to block with cards they don't want to block with anymore. They have to make really hard decisions once they're, like, at 12 or under. Like, because at that point, they just can't be taking, like, hammers for 4. They can't just be keeping themselves open to dying to dominate. And, yeah. So we saw our opponent pitch stack some kind of nice stuff, like a Dromai next to a Mirror Guy. But it just didn't end up mattering, because by the time it came back around, they're just going to have to block with those cards. I missed the Mage Master's Boots play early, so I'll just talk about it a little now. They were forced to use their Mage Master Boots just to make an Ash to play their Dromai on turn like 3. Not sure if that was ideal, although it probably was like a decent usage of their Mage Master boots, because they would have never been in a position to use their Mage Master boots aggressively to like do what they want to do with it, which is play Passing Mirage into Ghostly Touch. We were just way too aggressive. So hopefully we all learned a little bit this game. Hopefully it was fun. Comment, like, subscribe down below, especially if you saw any of my misplays. I love being corrected. I know a lot of people don't like being corrected, but being corrected elevates you to a new level of understanding. So I think we should all appreciate being corrected when we're actually being corrected, and not being told like maybe bad advice that's not really a correction, but like someone not really knowing what they're talking about. But of course, like, if you don't know what you're talking about and you correct someone, that's also good for you, because they'll probably have a rebuttal, and then you get to learn something as well. So, you know, as long as we're all respectful and having fun and trying to learn together, a rising tide lifts all ships. So we just keep trying to build each other up, and good luck in your nationals coming right up. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching.